Hey, welcome to Atmo. Today we're going to actually interview Igor Staritsin, a senior concept artist, matte painter over at ILM. And he's worked on some amazing stuff like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Game of Thrones. And he's going to be the first one to talk about his traditional paintings, which are quite awesome. And we really get to dig deep into his thought process and what he's thinking as he's painting. So they're really great tips to pick up on and learn from. And I'll also put a link to his Atmo profile down below in the description and also the Discord. So you can come hang out with fellow environment artists, lighters, matte painters, concept artists, and we'll hang out, give tips and tricks, and give each other some feedback. All right, let's get to this. All right, so welcome Igor Staritsin to another Atmo interview where we check out awesome, talented environment, concept artists, matte painters, anything environment related. And we just get to know them and learn their techniques and what's going on inside their head and see how they got into the industry. So Igor, welcome. You got into the industry like in 2008, I see. How'd that happen? You're at ILM now, right?
Yeah. Well, hi Jordan, first of all, and hi everybody who's watching now. So, yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I don't know how far back I should go, but well, yeah, like I think the first interaction was kind of, matte painting and conceptual work was back in 2008. And I think, prior to that, I was doing like web design, graphic design, that type of work, like before that. So, and I think to me, like back then, before 2008, I thought like, Photoshop was, the tool for like web design. And I thought that was the best. I didn't even know that things like matte painting or conceptual work existed. So to me, it was, graphic design and web design and those type of things was like the best thing you could do. So I was excited.
Well, for the general public, they see us as graphic designers, right?
Yeah, right. That's what you get like in
That's the cliche.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's what I thought. And I mean, until like 2008, I think I was first sort of introduced to like matte painting type of work or conceptual work in that sense, and I was like blown away that wow, people can do that. So it's like it's amazing, it's a large whatever environment painting that can be seen on a large screen, or painted as a guide sort of for CG or VFX team to kind of pull it off, and have it shown in the movie. So that was amazing to me, and so that kind of how we kind of started transitioning from web design to that area basically.
Was there a specific movie that's got you wanting to do it?
Like I think the funny thing I could say, obviously, yeah, movie it would be probably Star Wars and things of that nature, like Terminator and whatnot. So when I was a child, I was drawing a lot of those things inspired by Terminator, drawing like sort of like storyboards and whatnot, coming up with my own script back then for Terminator 3. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think it was not necessarily the movie. I was kind of I found work of legends like Dussault and whatnot. So, and I was excited to learn all that. And the funny story I can tell, I probably told it a couple of times, but like my first job, so to speak, with the company abroad with Disney. So, if you remember the website mattepainting.org, yeah, that was,
which doesn't exist anymore.
Right. I think it kind of transitioned to a little bit of a different thing now. But back then it was hot. It was like a big thing. So. Yeah, and I kind of discovered that website as well, and I think it was like a holiday season, like New Year. So I went to like a local, park and took a bunch of photos on my camera, and I just got like my, new tablet and whatnot. So I kind of did a painting, well, sort of matte painting. I guess these days it wouldn't hold up like quality-wise. So, and I posted it online on matte painting org. It was picked up by the whoever run back then the website. Mm-hmm. So they put it in the gallery on like front page. I was excited, like, oh wow, that's awesome. Like usually like the best paintings would be picked up. I was super excited because it was one of my first ones. So that was great, like a nice start. And then I think a couple months later or whatever, Disney got in touch with me saying like, well, we found your work on mattepainting.org and all that, so we are interested in, buying it if you have the copyrights. I was like, what?
Oh, wow.
I mean, I
What?
couldn't believe it. I mean, back then I didn't have any, experience whatsoever.
Do you still have the piece? I want to see
Man,
this
I
piece.
wish I had it. Well, unfortunately, I think it's like lost somewhere on the internet. I will have a look, and if I find it, I will let you know. But I think I tried, a couple times some time ago. I couldn't find it. Unfortunately, some of my very old stuff got lost. But anyway, so the funny thing is gonna happen. So, they get in touch. They ask, okay, do you have the copyrights and all that? Since it was my kind of like, private or for self promotion sort of piece. I say, yeah, it's all good. So and obviously, 2 emails later, they ask how much you want. So I was like, I have no idea how much to ask and what to do. And just by accident, they also, reach out to a friend of mine with, similar subjects. So they wanted to buy one of his paintings, who, I mean, that in one of his pieces was also picked up by, administrators. So
What resolution were these paintings?
mine was pretty bad. I think like 1,000, like about 2K. I think my painting.
Okay, so 2K could hold up in theater,
I think.
guess.
I think it wasn't even for theater. I think it was for like a billboard. I think they wanted to use it for the holiday season, probably upcoming one or the one that is going to be next year, whatever. I think they wanted to kind of print it out somehow or something like that. I think that was the idea. Yeah, I was concerned with that too, and I told them that that's what I have and everything, and they were, they were fine with it. So, I exchanged a couple emails with that friend of mine because he had more experience, and I asked him, well, man, what do you think we should tell them regarding the price? He said, well, I would probably say like $1,000, but for my painting, he said, I wouldn't even give like $500. I was like, well, okay, fair enough. So I've heard two numbers, right? Like 1,000 and 500. What should I do? Let's find like the sweet spot. So I decided to reply saying I want like 700. So I did send that email, and the reply from them was amazing. Like I still, up to this day, I can't believe they said that. But what they said was like, well, like we are, Disney, a serious company, well known and whatnot. So we are offering you $5,000. Would that work for you? I was like, man, well, hands down. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I said yes.
You could ask for probably 10,000.
Exactly. I mean, I could probably ask maybe even more than that, but yeah.
Wow.
That was fun. But yeah, that was like 2000, maybe 9, I think maybe it was, but something like that, probably early 2009 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of how I sort of started figuring out that, well, yeah, probably doing the right.
You can make money.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Probably doing the right thing.
Your parents probably finally got onto your side, right? So the support, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
You could go this path, this route.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was fun. That's kind of little story how it kind of started.
Cool. So, were you doing traditional painting before all this? Because you have a whole portfolio on doing traditional. Do you have that background, or like what's the deal?
Yeah, like as everyone says in every interview, like, well, I've been drawing since I since I was a child, and all. Well, it's sort of true for me. I mean, I wouldn't say like I did anything exceptional and whatnot, just generic stuff as every kid would do. But I was excited to portray and show what I had in my mind. And then as I was kind of growing and all that, so I kind of did it. But then I switched to music, so I went to music school and graduated.
Cool.
Yeah, at some point I was like very much into it. Like I had my own like hip hop kind of band, rap type of thing. Yep. So that was fun. Yeah, it was not necessarily like famous and whatnot, but kind of known, let's say, within my hometown.
Locally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, cool.
And then I think it just later when I realized that I didn't have connections to kind of make it as a career, I kind of felt like maybe I should just switch back to painting and whatnot. And I did like few workshops to sort of like refresh and pick up the skill and once again and kind of move forward. And yeah, that was sort of how it kind of transitioned, and since then I've been just doing it. Yeah,
I find that a lot of really talented artists have some sort of music background or some kind of edgy, out of the norm background, or maybe a troubled background, something, you know?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Look at yourself. Look at your background, right? Drummer, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
like I have another buddy who is into like drum and bass, and now he's the CG Soup, and he was doing graffiti. Aaron Lamonix apparently was doing a bunch of graffiti when he was.
Oh yeah, me too. I've done that too. Yeah, obviously, hip hop, culture and skateboarding and whatever else. Yeah, we did all that, like crazy. Yeah, crazy stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it fosters creativity, right?
Yeah,
because how could you want to, like, if you want to create, you're gonna want to explore those avenues in other fields when you're growing up, right? So like I never actually drew growing up. I was just doing drums, right?
Okay.
So I just figured, well, obviously that's my creativity.
Right.
And then I did like mechanical engineering, some stuff in high school, and I don't need to get into my background, but like I just feel that if you're an artist growing up, you're gonna be doing something related to that, no matter what. Like if you're in this industry, it has to be connected somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
So. Cool. So your first gig was in Disney, which is
funny, yeah.
Not really like your first working there, but your first freelance gig, which is often the hardest.
It is, yeah, often, yeah.
So what would have been your actual first studio? Like how'd you? So you got your job, or not really a job, you sold that, and then you're like, okay, I can make this a career. How did you go forward after that, like to actually turn it into a career?
Yeah, I mean, by the time that happened, I mean, I obviously I was already kind of, doing that. I mean, just real quick, going back to that web design thing, because I just thought it was the best thing. I mean, web design, because I didn't know anything better. But then while I was doing that, I realized that, I just like doing more of paintings, like, I think the trend now is different, but back then some websites, they kind of like the idea, or some clients rather, they like the idea of having like some illustration at the very top of the website representing the service that they do and whatnot. And I really like doing that. It's, it was more like whatever, photo batching, maybe a little bit of 3D to make that illustration and whatnot. So I really like doing that part, and I wasn't necessarily so excited about UI type of thing, which is not the best thing for website, right? You want a UI to be very good. Anyway, so yeah, and that's kind of what got me to do, this type of thing. And so by the time I worked with Disney, I was already doing it a little bit. But then I think, I was freelancing and working. I was actually working in my hometown, which was back in Russia. And then I started freelancing for a studio. I think the name was Brewery VFX. The studio is in London. So my first, I think, feature film credit, like, with the company from abroad. Like, I think it was Welcome to the Punch, the movie was. I think it came out 2000, maybe, I don't know, 10 or something like that. But yeah, they were kind enough to put me in the credit list because, I was freelancing for them for a while, but sometimes they just don't put you in the credit if you're not in the studio, things like that. But yeah, I think that was kind of it. And then 2012, I went to Turkey. The studio was a 2000 volt, so work in-house there. That was kind of, again, first experience going abroad to like visual effects facility to work on a movie. Yeah, that was kind of, and after that it was MPC, then it was, well, bunch of other ones, Pixamondo, Axis Animation, Digic, what else, Method Studios, ILM. Yeah, that was a lot. Yeah,
that's cool. I find, so that's cool that you were able to go to Turkey. So I find that this industry actually gives us a lot of opportunity to be able to travel around and see other areas, especially people that aren't American, so they can move over to other countries or just travel around or just stay and freelance. It's fun.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So you're at ILM now. Is that the deal?
Yeah, that's the deal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you matte painting with them or concept art? Because you started out as a matte painter, right? Or I guess technically a website designer, but then
Yeah.
matte painter and then transitioned into concept art?
I think to me it's always been kind of both. I mean, even though the title would be, for my earlier, gigs would be matte painting, but I, for some reason, I guess, kind of mental philosophy and approach was always, for some reason, towards working at a studio rather than freelance. Although I did like few years of like pure freelance in between, let's say while I was waiting for visa, let's say for a year, I would, still make money doing freelance work. And freelance would be both really matte painting and conceptual work. And the same when I work at a studio. I think the reason being is because, and you probably know that too, like some matte painters these days, and even back then, some of them more, let's say, on the creative side of things, some maybe more technical, right? And it's, I guess it's a kind of, well, sort of job of, art director or VFX soup to kind of find out where your strength is. And if they see that, you like doing art or creative tasks, whatever, more, so they would give you those, this dev task or, conceptual tasks or matte paintings that kind of require a little bit more of a creative input. So, and I was fortunate that most of my art directors and clients and all that, they were able to, to see that in me. So I was, for the most part, doing both, really. Even, like I said, if the earlier days, the title was matte painting, for some reason, it was always kind of both. And here at ILM, it's pretty much the same. For the most part, it's conceptual work, some art direction as well, and sometimes matte paintings too. And saying that, it reminds me, before I started at ILM, I spoke with Yannick Dussault, and he told me that, man, the moment they know you can do it, matte paintings, they will ask for your help. And I was like, okay, let's see. And he was right on the money with that. Like, once they know you can do it, they will ask for your help. And that's what happens sometimes. And it might be fun. Like, to me, if it's big, like epic shot, I'm totally down for it. But obviously, things like little patch here in there, I'm like, nah, I'm not excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's technically supposed to be like the junior or mid work, but then if they're just trying to grab you over from the scene, they're probably like, we need help, just it's probably the last straw.
They got you on the show, and sometimes they just have, or they might not have budget for too many people. I mean, sometimes I would lead like few people, and they would do that type of work, and I would kind of supervise that. But sometimes they just might not have budget, or they know that if they have me, I can do this, and that would be quick. So they just do that, which is not always great for me, because sometimes those tasks might not necessarily be the most fun to do, but you kind of want to help, and work is work. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's something that you wish would end a little bit sooner than later, but it is what it is. So that's kind of the idea.
Do you think that maybe your hip hop background was able to understand the technical side of matte painting faster than the traditional? Because you had to do a lot of probably Fruit Loops.
Fruity Loops, definitely. Yeah, that was my go-to tool. Back then we had Cubase and stuff, but I think Cubase was kicking off a little bit later. I was full on Fruity Loops before that whole Cubase thing started. I kind of wrapped things up by the time.
So do you think it's just because you're able to handle the technology back then already? Because that matte painting is very technical as well. But then on top of that, I feel if you have a music background, you can kind of understanding the layer and kind of not going so heavy on the, say, atmosphere or brushwork or something. Like you're too hard, you can kind of pull it back a little bit and find a balance. Because in music, you're always kind of push and pulling.
Right.
Same with art. It's always like a push and pull effect. So do you think that just I feel like a lot of people maybe struggle with that when they're first learning, but maybe with your background, you think it maybe sped it up a little bit. I don't, or maybe I'm just
No.
talking some bullshit.
I think that that definitely makes sense. Especially let's say if we like relate Fruity Loops somehow to Photoshop, there is a bit of maybe similarity in a way. Meaning like there you kind of use with or deal with layers, and maybe in Photoshop you can somehow relate to that. I think definitely that helped too. Although I think to me, because I grew up in Russia, I've been exposed since like I was very young to a lot of great art. We still have, and we had a lot of great artists, and I was always fascinated by landscape, paintings. I've been to a lot of museums many times, and when I look, I still like remember now going to those museums, looking at those paintings. I was always like, man, it's so amazing. And I always felt like I would never be able to do anything close to that level. I was just so excited and just amazed by the quality, and seeing it, up close or stepping back and looking from the distance. I was just excited so much. And then I guess, well, like I said, I was doing even back then some doodles and some little watercolor and whatnot, but obviously to me all that seemed to be like very much of a different level, and I couldn't even imagine that I would be like a painter of some sort. But then I think as time went on and I grew up and I kind of figured out that digital has something to do with that too, and when I found out that matte painting actually and conceptual art related to that in a way that you can do those epic landscapes and things like that, I was like, well, maybe there is a chance. I think that was kind of what was driving me, the high quality art that I kind of saw from, so let's say day one. I think that was big thing for me to kind of nurture, let's say, the taste, and I guess let me understand what was good for me. And I guess, that would be.
Yeah. Well, now you can just build it on 3D, right? You don't have to go climbing, sculpting with real marble or anything.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of 3D, when did you actually start incorporating 3D into your work? Or was it always just from the beginning, basically?
I think it's definitely been since beginning. I think, I started, like let's say the matte painting kind of journey, probably 2008. And I obviously started more in kind of diving more in Photoshop towards like photo bashing, even more than I was before. And then, I realized that 3ds Max and V-Ray was, go-to kind of thing. So I learned that in, pretty much the same time. And then, but I think to me, the way I looked at it, it was always like, there is 3D, there was 2.5D, new projections and whatnot, which is great. But to me, it was always like, I want to make sure that my fundamentals as sharp as they can be. And I always wanted to make sure that I keep like sharpening them as I go through, no matter what, whether I learn 3D like crazy or not. I just want to make sure that 2D side of things would stay, sharp. And that was always like a goal for me. And still these days, like no matter what I guess that's also, part of the reason why I still do traditional paintings and drawings and whatnot, because I just feel it's very, important. But kind of answer that question. I think it was since the beginning. Then I switched to Maya because I realized that 3ds Max is great, but Maya was more of a thing in visual effects. So I switched to Maya. And I've been using Maya, I guess, till like even this day. Maya and V-Ray. This day not that much. These days not that much, because Blender is a little bit more faster for some things, and there is some free stuff that is fun to use, and there are some basically a couple things that I like there that kind of made me, I think, switch to that as well. But I think honestly, I think it doesn't matter whatever you want to use.
Yeah. Going back to your traditional point, so what kind of habits or exercises or things to focus on do you have, like suggestions for, like, let's say juniors or students or even mids And you could talk about yourself or like what you think about currently.
Yeah.
Do you have any like advice on like what they should think about, what kind of techniques or practice stuff that they do in their sketchbook or anything? Or
Yeah, I think specifically for environment, conceptual work or photorealistic matte painting and things of that nature, because I teach myself, CGMA class, so I see, what usually, what sort of issues, students would have. It usually has to do with, values, lighting, composition, obviously too. I think like mostly those three probably would be at the top of the list. Sometimes issues with perspective as well, with color too. But let's say those three would be the first and foremost. And I think the best way, or let's say the best and a little bit easier way, would be to do a bunch of studies like from photographs, and make sure you do studies from photographs that are not heavily color corrected, but rather something that resembles real life. Because these days, especially because everyone has a camera and whatnot, they put like filters and whatever else, and you might fall into a trap of studying like a bad photo, and that would not do a favor for you. So but anyway, like trying to study relationships of values and colors and lighting from photographs, that would be a very, very, very good thing to try to improve on those subjects. Not necessarily falling into like details and very tiny little things, but rather like bold and big statements like planes, basically with like bigger brush, just fill in the planes. But even better way, if you really want to like learn it thoroughly, like in depth, I would suggest going out and paint from life. I know it's much more difficult. I know it's much more maybe time consuming, and some people maybe even kind of scared or whatever. But I think the thing is with that, real quick, is that because you see it with your own eyes, and camera would not do the same if you just take a photo and walk away, because you didn't study it. But while you are there and spending few hours looking at your subject, you just gonna study it. You will remember that experience for quite some time, if not forever. You will remember how light was bouncing off of that rock on that rock. You will see what was the true color of the shadow, and just like really how the things look like. And that would help you to learn for real how things look like, and that knowledge will later translate in your paintings. And some people might think, well, not necessarily, because in digital we do this, or maybe you get stuff from render. Well, that's true, but sometimes you need to make decisions, or sometimes you don't have ability to rely on 3D and whatnot, and in that very moment this knowledge will be useful, because you will know what color, and you can even tweak your render towards how things look more in real life. Yeah, that's kind of idea.
Yeah, a lot of times like the renders, I mean, most of the time they don't come out photorealistic.
Right.
So you have to, accentuate like, okay, well now I want the eye to lead to this spot. Maybe I need more bounce light. Maybe I need a light coming in here. Let's just paint that in, You're not gonna. And on top of that, I find that a lot of CG renders on the internet that are tons of geo, super technically advanced, but the image itself does not look photoreal, nor does it look that appealing. Like it's so much noise, right? They just think, oh, look, I'm so awesome SCG. But if you just understand like what you're saying, how light works, how to control the eye, how to understand the values, you can manipulate that, and then you can actually have a real beautiful image.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
And
totally.
that,
Yeah, by the way, to kind of add to what you're saying, definitely true what you said. Like the tendency these days is to throw in a lot of stuff and hoping, well, I mean, of course not for everybody, but I kind of see it quite a bit too. Like throw a bunch of stuff in and hoping that the more details I have, the better it's gonna look with it, which in fact is not usually.
It might work on social media.
It might work in some cases, yeah, but
whoa, look at all the geometry.
Quite often less is more, right? And I think if you really know how to like utilize that idea, less is more, it's gonna actually, work well for you, and image is gonna look really, tight and nice, and like readability of it is gonna be there. And that doesn't mean you cannot put bunch of details, but if you find the way to subordinate the ones that are not necessary for the viewer and make sure you kind of play up what is important, you can still have, like, let's say, quite a bit of detail, but if you control them well, that's what usually make it work. Yeah.
Do you think that happens a lot now in movies and TV in general? Just like the industry has gotten so easy to throw a lot of stuff in there that it's a bit heavy-handed?
I guess with some movies, yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I kind of prefer stuff that is more like grounded. That's why, as far as, from aesthetic standpoint, I like Star Wars. It's one of my favorite. I mean, not necessarily like, let's say, story and whatnot, but just from like visual standpoint, right? Dune.
It's just strong
yeah,
shapes.
Yeah,
everywhere.
like big shapes, statements. Lighting is kind of on point and stuff like that. So everything that is in there, it's usually on purpose. It's not happen to be there, just by accident. They really think through it. I mean, I work on a few Star Wars movies, so and working with Doug Chang, I definitely know how picky he was about, very sort of, well, I mean, it kind of depends on what stage you are in production. If it's in pre-production, obviously that's a little bit different story. It's more about design and not necessarily about very little things. But in post-production, he was, on some shows, he was very specific, because we did visual concepts for a different vendor, and then we would send it to that vendor, so they would basically have to match it 1-to-1, which is quite rare, but that's kind of idea there. Sorry. And yeah, that was fun. So but some movies definitely go a bit over the top. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Was Star Wars like your dream studio to, I mean, not studio.
Yeah, the project, right?
Dream movie to work on. Like, were there any kind of jaded reality checks of like when you worked on your dream movie? Oh my God, I'm working on it, and then you're like, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be like.
Right.
Or are you just not allowed to say any of that? That's okay.
No, well, I see what I mean. I think, I think it kind of depends, in general, what team you have and what project. To me, definitely Star Wars was a big one. And I was kind of fortunate in that sense that, when I joined ILM, like, basically within, like, first few months, I was working on Star Wars. And that was, like, a feature film, which, unfortunately, now is on hold. Maybe it comes back, maybe not. But I was, like, within first five people who actually touched the movie to do, like, designs for it. And working with James Klein was a big thing for me, because I'm a fan of his work. He's a great designer, great like art director, this dev supervisor, so definitely was amazing. I was a little bit sad that Yannick left, because Yannick Dussault, that he left before I joined, because I really wanted to work with him. But that was a little bit late, but still keep in touch. And Star Wars was super cool, because I think I had in mind what it would be, and while working on it, it was basically the same what I thought. It was very challenging because the team was so cool, and like I said, working with legends definitely puts some pressure on you, right? You're like, man, I don't want to mess up here. I want to do my best. And, I think it went pretty well. We spent me and some of the other guys, we spent like 10 months on it, which was, great. A lot of art. Like, I was so happy, like, man, I could wipe off the whole portfolio now and just put what we did during that time. And that's it. But unfortunately, since the movie is on hold, we can't show anything, and if it's not coming back, that's it. It's gonna be in the box forever, which is sad, but that's what it is.
Oh no.
But
maybe,
a lot of fun.
Maybe someone will hack it.
Oh,
it's a leak.
Obviously not. But I mean, like, you just trying your best. You work with such talented and legendary team,
You want to show
and yeah,
it.
you're like, man, one day we're gonna show it all, and it's not gonna happen. That's a little bit of a sad part of it, but
Yeah.
still a great experience. Yeah, I mean, that was super cool. Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest highlights as far as project.
Did you ever go? I've heard that they're pretty blunt on their critique and harsh. I don't know, maybe it's different now, but were there any times where you just go home and cry? You're like, I'm not good enough, or was it just fine?
No, I don't think they would the very harsh like this. No, not really. They would actually very much on point most of the time. Sometimes I would say you might put some extra pressure on yourself. Well, in my case, me, I might feel like, well, because some of the best people in the game on this show now, so I kind of want to make sure that I do my best. So, and I might put a little bit of an extra there, but that's just me. I don't necessarily have to do it or something like that. But it also feels like when you work with legends, you kind of want to also learn from them too. And if you show stuff, you kind of want to listen to their feedback and make sure you really learn from it. I think
sure.
Yeah, that was kind of my approach to it. But I don't think they were ever like harsh or something like. No, very much very kind. Yeah, everybody.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you definitely leveled up during that.
Well, I would hope so. Yeah.
Were there any times, just being in the industry in general, like where crunch just became too much and you were questioning your career path, or you just didn't care and you just figured out, worked through it, and you got figured out your work habits better through it? Or because we all have those crazy crunch times.
Yeah, I mean, what about you in that sense? I mean, I think I had maybe couple. Well, I guess throughout the whole journey, I probably had few moments when you kind of jaded and maybe you're tired and everything. But I think to me, as long as it keeps you excited about what you're doing, as long as it's creative, keeps you on the feet and kind of thinking, coming up with like creative ideas and stuff like that. That what I guess makes me happy. When it starts to be, sometimes like if you're assigned on a show and that show, let's say in post-production, right? And tasks might be different. So sometimes you're working on really cool stuff and you have creative freedom. You might help with art direction and make creative decisions and whatnot. And you're done with it. Then you move to other tasks that might be not as much fun. And if you stay with those tasks for a little longer, that's when I start feeling a little bit kind of tired and jaded and really not happy, let's say. So I try to maybe balance it maybe with my personal work if I can. But I think kind of that what kind of would make me, and that definitely happened a few times. But I just try to kind of run through it and maybe do traditional art if I have time, just to kind of balance it out. I think that's really the way to do it. And what about you in that sense? Do you feel the same, or?
Well, I'm not happy. I'm never happy when I get overtime out of nowhere when it wasn't actually my fault.
Oh yeah.
Like there's like when you're working on something and you just know like, okay, I messed up or I just need to improve on this, and you're happy to just like keep on doing it. But then when some other project gets thrown on you and you're like, hey, we need this like next on Monday, and you get it on Friday, you're like, what? Like, that's not cool.
Right.
So it doesn't happen that often, but when that happens, I get furious. I actually regret one reaction I had one time. I mean, nothing, there was like, it went fine, but it was just like, I was heated. Like, you've been working on this for 6 months and now what? But no, it's just,
especially with matte painting, right? Like, sometimes they might ask you, okay, well, they've been working on that for whatever time, 6 months. Can you fix it during this couple of weekend days? By Monday, we need to have it, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
It's like, dude, I have a life. I have plans. You can't just throw this on me. So some studios are way better at that than others. That is for sure. So like I always encourage, don't be afraid to
To
just
say no, right?
explore and stand up.
Oh, you know what's
Like,
fun?
but
Oh, yeah.
No,
Sorry,
go
go
on.
ahead. I think we have a little bit of a delay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, sorry, no, go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah. Just on that thought, because you've mentioned that. Yeah, I think one of the studios where I worked at, Digic Pictures, that was in Hungary, in Budapest. I worked there for like a year and a half, maybe a little bit more. Can't remember now. I think the work-life balance is very good, and I think during that time, I think I did only. I mean, I did OT only once, which is well. I mean, it's not. I mean, I don't know if we consider it VFX. I mean, it's like cinematics. Well, it's kind of VFX, but I mean, it's not feature film, so maybe we call it differently. I'm not sure, but I think that is really good, and maybe for some people who kind of looking for that, you know, studio work and life work balance, I think that's a cool place. And also, what's fun about it, by the way, it's like that they do cinematics, and as we know in cinematic, it's usually like, you know, a couple minutes long or something like that, and most of it is epic, which is great. So the chances that you get to work on epic stuff is way more or higher there than than if you're on a feature film that might have one or two shots and the rest of it is, you know, something else. So yeah, that's just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it's studio to studio. I encourage people and artists to just, you know, talk about it with each other, even talk about their incomes and stuff like that, and just, you know, so then other people. That's why I have that anonymous income survey on the site, just to hopefully become more transparent and see like what you can get, what are your actually worth, so you don't get taken advantage of. Because I find studios, definitely certain studios, take advantage of artists because they take advantage of their passion, right? So they're like, well, I shouldn't care how much I make because I'm making art.
Right.
So it's like, no.
Well, I guess with some juniors, I mean, I've seen that myself. I mean, well, luckily I haven't done it myself, but I've seen it when, more of a junior, you know, artists, they would, just stay late and all that stuff just because they're very, very passionate. They want to get that experience. And I mean, I guess at the beginning, you know, we sort of maybe all to a degree do that, but I think you're definitely right.
Yeah.
We should not let it be a tendency or a thing taken for granted that we would work overtime for free and whatnot. So we should definitely make sure we get paid like fair money, and then definitely don't let them take advantage of you. Absolutely.
All right, so let's check out your work. All right, let's do a share screen.
So you're gonna share, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the screen.
Awesome.
Whoa, what was the screen? Oops.
Yeah, the black and white feature worked. I think I clicked on the button a couple times. I think it worked.
Oh yeah.
I know.
I got that fixed.
Yeah, I think with David, I think you had some of the thing there, but now I think it worked. All good. Yeah.
So you see my screen now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you've got your matte paintings, you got your traditional and your concepts. Which ones do you want to go over first?
Whatever works best. I mean, we can start from left to right.
Let's check out the traditionals. I haven't done traditional yet on here, so let's check this out first.
Sure, yeah. Looks like fun. Yeah.
And it's cool. I can't do this traditionally. I need to actually start, like you said, I need to start doing this more. Like it's just, I don't know how to use. So do you use gouache on this, or what do you use?
This is oil. I mean, I did use gouache and watercolor and whatever else, and crayons and pencil and everything before. But I think oil, to me, it just sticks to me, and I mean, I just love it. You know, the texture, the glazes and all that you can do, like scumbling glazing. I mean, you can do some of it with gouache, with acrylics as well. But I feel like oil, just like I said, texture and just the feel of it, it kind of just works for me. I just love it. Yeah.
Yeah, like this one is big, like what we said before, right? Just break it up into basic shapes. This is ideal, right? You just have this one giant shape, and then you have the empty space there, and it's not just full of stuff.
Yeah, right. Like
Um,
clarity and simplicity. Yeah, I think this one was inspired by, I think, Scott Christensen. Like I looked at his work and really got inspired, and I did some studies outdoors that kind of made me think about his work. And so in combination of few studies at his some of his paintings, I kind of combined and came up with something like that. But yeah, I think I like. I mean, some people start when they do traditional and even digital. Some people start with like, kind of messy blobs and lines and things like that. I kind of start usually with approach of like, let's say like 10 lines. So you kind of define the major. I mean, it's not necessarily like a perfect drawing. It's more of a placement, really. Where goes what? So I'm not necessarily trying to draw a perfect mountain or perfect tree or whatever else. It's more about placement and seeing where goes what. So that kind of helps me to make sure that the lines and placement of objects would be good before I start messing with colors and things like that. Because if you figure out that your composition is messed up when you like halfway through or close to the end, it's basically the worst thing. You better start over or something like that. And obviously that's not very much fun. So you kind of want to eliminate those potential mistakes, I guess, sooner than later. So yeah.
so you do a rough sketch underneath,
Yeah.
and then what do you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
Like, how do you build this up?
Yeah.
Is it kind of, do you basically use the same techniques that you do when you're doing concept as well?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I would start. Well, I mean, like finding idea, I would start with the little kind of thumbnail sketches. I might have. I don't know if I even have some here on my notepad. I mean, I do a bunch of scribbles sometimes, but something that even makes sense. But yeah, it's just let me some figure drawings. Maybe it's not even here, but basically it's like little thumbnails that I would do in my notepad with like markers. So I have like, let's say, a bunch of markers like this, so I can kind of do like thumbnails. I think it's Prisma color markers. So I would do like bunch of thumbnails, figuring out where goes what as far as big shapes, and then looking at those thumbnails, I would kind of see what is going to be the best layout for my painting. So checking that, and I mean, man, I think I can't find it. I'm sorry. I think it's just a bunch of stuff here.
No worries.
But yeah, that would be kind of idea. So then once I figured out, the thumbnail and basic placement, so I would do like a study. So meaning like, let's say a little one, 8x4 or something like that. I mean, and we are talking now about studio painting, let's say like indoors painting. So I would do like a study. And study, I usually do like indoor study based off of outdoor study, because I want to make sure that my colors and values and everything is taken for something that I have experience with. So preferably if I paint it outdoors, so I have a painting done outdoors, so I bring it in. So outdoors I capture light, honest colors and everything of that nature. So now in studio I can do those thumbnails and scribbles and whatnot, developing my new composition based on that. But later the colors and stuff I will take from that study outdoors and reapply them on this new study that I'm doing indoors with refined composition. That's usually the best approach that I find. And yeah, so I might do a few little studies like that, and then once I'm sort of happy or seeing the potential of going large, I might just do a larger painting. Sometimes those little studies never end up like whatever I want to see, and they never.
So how large was this?
I think in meters, I think it's like a meter and something by 90 or something, 90 centimeters, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this went into a gallery, an actual studio gallery?
I think so. Well, that was I painted this one long time ago. I think it's 2015. It might have been in a show. I painted it in Hungary, so I brought it back to Russia, and yeah, I mean it's been a long time, but yeah, I don't have it here with me. Yeah, it's just in a different country. Yeah.
Have your techniques evolved since doing this one?
I think so. I mean, I usually try to sort of, like I said, keep it relatively simple, but still making sure that, where I want you to look, I kind of keep it a little bit more tight or tighter. Not
Yeah.
necessarily I'm trying to make everything more detailed these days, but I think, well, I mean, I hope to think that I kind of, you know,
Improved.
yeah, a little bit more, so I kind of have control over certain things. And I mean, if I painted now, I would probably do it a little bit differently. I do like certain things, but I would certainly rearrange the bottom part of it quite a bit, like the mountain itself, and some things I would also change. But the mountain, that would not bother me so much. But the base of it, I would definitely change. But sometimes we also try new things and try to experiment and things like that, and those experiments don't always come out great. And some stuff that I do now, sometimes I look at it and like, it's terrible.
But that's a lot of times. If you don't have that, then that means you're not improving.
Yeah, right. So. Like, if you struggle, it means you're growing. Otherwise it would be the same thing you're doing over and over, and it means like you kind of master it, but you're not growing. So yeah, it's definitely good to try new things for sure. Yeah,
I like the brushwork of this. Simple, and then you got the like what you're saying, less detail, and then where you want the eye to go is more detail. Was this done more recently?
Yeah, this was, I think, let's see, like today we have 2023, so I think it's like 5 years ago or something. Yeah, this was in a few shows, and it was acquired by a friend of mine.
Nice.
Yeah, he got it. Yeah, this was.
So how long does it take to do? Like, are you faster at doing these versus using Photoshop or CG or anything?
You know what's funny? I think it depends what you do. Like, once I took a workshop with Scott Christensen, like he told me, like, it's funny by him. I mean, he's such a legend, and he told me, well, you paint quite fast, but it doesn't always mean that you have to paint this fast. Sometimes it's better to slow down and really think through. So these days, I mean, I could paint something like this pretty fast, or let's say it would look similar to that, and maybe for the public it would look like it's done, but essentially I would spend probably quite some time on top of it later in different sessions to kind of finesse a little bit and make sure that little things would read the way I want. It's basically that saying, like 10%, last 10% is basically 90% of your time in painting. Like first, in your first session, I usually kind of try to block it in, like and it might kind of look like more of a rough finished version of it, but I usually see a lot of things that I could fix, like edges and accents, and maybe how I want to emphasize one thing and subordinate the other one. It's just a lot about those little things, and maybe little hue shifts and bounce lights and things of that nature that just kind of, even though they look very not important maybe from the, like if you zoom out, but when you look at it as a whole thing, once it's all there, it really makes a big difference. So I kind of want to make sure that I apply that. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, do you have any like kind of phases where you feel lost when you're doing it, like you're just kind of like insecure making it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see where this is going now?
Yeah, definitely sometimes it happens, like that you feel a little bit lost. But I think for that, and I mean, to avoid that, I usually try to do those studies before I start a larger one. So basically that would mean that when I go to a larger one, I kind of have a roadmap. But obviously it doesn't solve the whole thing, because when you go larger, the whole problem got bigger too. So you would have to figure out little things here and there. And usually, like, the overall thing is there, but maybe because you went larger, you need to figure out, design of that little corner where there is nice arrangement of rocks. How can I make it nice and not overpower the whole thing? So where you might get stuck, and try to figure out what to do best and things like that. So yeah, definitely little things like that certainly affect.
Are these just from imagination, or are they from like you're there, or are they from photos?
This one is very much based on plein air painting. This is in Vancouver. Here we have Cleveland Dam, and this mountain is, the name of it is the Lions. So I've painted a bunch of times there outdoors on location, and I have some studies online, I think, of it. And I mean, what I wanted to do, I kind of wanted to change the foreground a little bit. So the foreground with those pine trees and rocks, I took that arrangement from the trip when I went to Canadian Rockies. I'm not sure if you've ever been, but if not, definitely recommend.
No,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Banff National Park and Jasper, like amazing. It's kind of like Grand Teton Park in a way, but obviously different, or Yellowstone and things of that nature. So yeah, being there, I painted there a bunch of times. Well, not a bunch of times, but quite a few studies I did there. So some of that contributed to this, some of the photographs that I took there. So a little bit of so-called matte painting, taking ideas from here and there and combining it all, trying to try to come up with something that you're happy with.
So when you're painting it, technique wise, do you start with, I guess, like a darker color for the trees and then you put the highlights in, or did you start with a white and then put in, like, how'd you layer it together kind of thing?
Right. I would usually start, I would probably usually kind of tone the canvas a little bit towards more of that yellow ochre, or kind of brownish sort of color. And then I would do that preliminary painting or drawing with same color too. So it would be basically, in a way, kind of like black and white, if you will, version of it. It's basically like value study. So do that, and the reason being, well, sometimes I might be a little bit more loose with that, sometimes a little bit more detailed with that preliminary painting, because if I exactly know where it goes what, I might be a little more detailed. If not, I might be a little bit loose, and also depending on time. But the reason being, usually for warmer color, underneath of it, is because some of it might show through a little bit when you paint opaque on top. There are still might be some checks on the canvas that kind of show through a little bit of that warmth. And usually, because I would usually do like outdoor scenes that have a lot of cool light, a little bit of that warmth as a complementary would show through and make it a little bit more vibrant. Although, in this kind of indoor studio paintings, it doesn't usually show through all that much, because you usually do like few layers and glazing and stuff like that. So most of it is covered, obviously, but still some of it might show through in some of the outdoors paintings. It definitely helps to make it a little bit more vibrant. Yeah, that's kind of approach.
And so when you're kind of like for figuring out the colors of, let's say, the shadows and the whites, what's going through your mind there? Like, how are you figuring out, okay, well, the highlights of the snow are going to be like this, taking on kind of like more of the sky, but then how are you maybe thinking about for the rocks or for the trees, or
right,
like what's your thought process and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a little bit of time and study. If you're doing like work of art, you kind of, it's still, representational, and it's kind of through your mind. But I think in general, the idea is like, because you do those outdoors paintings and you're looking at the real colors and you're trying to capture them as best as you can, then what you do is you sort of, when you do like the following painting based on that study, what you do is you sort of trying to push those colors a little bit more, to kind of, especially in the areas where you want the viewer to look at. You kind of want to make them see what makes you feel alive about that scene. You want to push certain, accents, certain colors a little bit more, just exaggerate enough to kind of play it up slight a bit. And I think
So like what areas would that be happening in the painting?
well,
do I have markups on here? Do you see like a tab for like drawing on top?
I see a cursor, but I don't see any like line drawings or whatever. If you
like, you don't have any features for share on your end to say like, do you use some like drawing markups for?
Oh, on mine, like here, I don't think I'm seeing.
No.
Well, I mean, I can just verbally. I mean, I can maybe.
I can actually do markups on here. Let's just say,
I think you should. I mean, I can open Photoshop and bring it in, if that would be sufficient.
Sure. I mean, that's even cooler.
So this is that painting that we're talking about. This was a study, one of the studies prior to this painting. So as you can see, it's kind of similar, but a little different. There was also here. So this was on that spot, and that's what I was saying. See, like it's a little bit of that orangish, reddish under painting. That was like a few years ago. I maybe 5 years ago. So it's just, and the funny thing, like you spend a couple hours doing this, the light is changing so much sometimes. So it's funny, like when I take, let's say, this photo, and when by the end of the session I would take, next photo with the finished painting, it doesn't look like the scene here doesn't look like what I was looking at when I was painting. But anyway, that was kind of one of it. So then different time came there. I think it was April or something like that. So there were like clouds and stuff like that. So a little bit of this. So then I don't have a location photo of that. So all of it, and I think.
So you definitely like crop into it with your mind, and then add extra elements just to compositionally make it more appealing.
Yeah, I mean this.
Because like this doesn't have like that previous photo that you have. Like if you go back. Like that's more of a river that you think is in there, but what you're showing me is more of like a big giant
lake.
Right.
I think what for this one, I think I probably went with like paper, a notepad, and I probably did just a study of this section. Sometimes I'm not trying to do like a final painting, but rather relationships of certain things. So as honest as I can be with it, trying to capture that, and based on that, I can bring it home and develop something more based on that. So whereas these ones were more trying to capture the whole thing, obviously focusing more within this section right here. So kind of cropping in a way more towards that. And here obviously the idea was more to kind of start from here, kind of move the eye towards this section, then from here to kind of let you bounce through these sections, and ended up being over here. So it's kind of very much strategically placed accents, kind of guiding you through the image. Like this rock is also quite important, so it's sort of like cropped a little bit on the edge here, so that you kind of feel that there is something else there. So it's also kind of makes you wonder what is outside of the scene. So things like that basically. Oh, you know what? Real quick, I can share something else if you don't mind. That would be fun.
Okay, sure.
Real quick. Just, this is on the spot. So also going more towards this section right there. So kind of painting it, and then this and this and that. And this is kind of like final version of it. So really studying this relationships of how light is hitting that rock and stuff like that. And I can show you, I mean, of course, on the photo, it doesn't really show the way the eye can see it, but I can show you the video on location, if that would be of any help. I mean, it's so much fun to do this stuff, and it's super challenging too. And then another one on the different day.
So like what you were saying, basically, there's the whole exposure thing with the camera. Okay, now you can see it more there.
Well, this is a different painting, different day, different.
So like, because in that photo you had the darker, more crunched blacks in it compared to the actual painting, but you're saying when you were looking at it, you saw more bounce light on the sides of in the shadows.
Yeah, you see more bounce light. You study the light much more in depth because you basically forced to look at it for like few hours while you're doing it. And light is changing and everything. You have to make either like a compromise, or you block in your shadows first when you're starting making that, value
Yeah.
pattern, sort of like shadow pattern, and then you just follow it throughout the whole session. I mean, yeah, the light might change, but let's say, and yeah, the shadows might change, but let's say overall color of the shadow would stay more or less the same, so you can still relate to it even, later when light slightly changed and the shadow slightly changed, but you capture the initial.
So this is the tricky part, because in film you're basing off the camera, right? So it's all about exposure. So you'll have like these dark blacks and bright whites, or vice versa, lifted and everything, so blown out. So you think that, well, in real life I would see way more in the shadows, but then when you're painting it or doing a digital matte painting, it doesn't really match so much. Like, how's your mindset on that? Do you feel like you should always think exposure, camera exposure, or do you think, what does it look like in real life first?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're doing a painting for a movie that is going to be shown on the screen, of course you have to respect the way that camera would kind of show it. But I think what's useful there is, still some, well, let's put it this way. Well, yeah, we do like for the realistic paintings that are maybe shown on a big screen, but we also, we still, even in those super realistic matte paintings, sometimes we're still playing up certain things. Sometimes you still can see, okay, well, it's very cool, super realistic matte painting, but you still know it's matte painting, because we're still pushing a little bit more depth. We're still doing those little fine things that, like I said, makes us feel alive and, just excited about that. So I find this similar idea here. Sometimes you might play up that bounce light just a little bit, just to make it a tiny more beautiful, and that would kind of do that. It's just going to be a little bit nicer. And of course it also depends on the show, on the supervisor and things like that, but I guess if you just don't go over the board, but a little bit of it can really help. Like I just recently wrapped up one show, and I've been doing exactly what I'm just saying. Like, although it's not for feature film, it is, for animation, but I've been using exactly that, like playing things up a little bit, exaggerating that bounce light, from the different planes and stuff like that. Definitely helps quite a bit. And your supervisors, if they understand your strength in that, they can certainly bring you on to do even art direction paint overs for the rest of the team and things like that, to sort of just make it a little bit more the way that I would see it. And like I said, sometimes it's useful. Sometimes, you want to be a little bit more reserved, maybe the way the camera can see it. But I think you can still find the spots to make it work. I find.
Like, I guess this would be probably a good example of this matte painting you did, where it's at night. But you think, well, at night I wouldn't really be able to see so much. But then you'd also be surprised that the moon does light up a lot.
Right.
But with the camera, you can expose up and see a lot more too.
Yeah.
So it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess, night paintings are always a little bit of interpretation, I would say, in a way, right? So yeah, like you're saying, it might either go full black if you expose for the moon, or it might not if you expose a little bit differently, but it might still look a little bit funky. So we kind of have to take a little bit of that creative freedom to make it look nice and believable. And frankly, right, in visual effects, we always cheat that moonlight to kind of play it up. So yeah.
So how would you? Is this all photos, or did you use any 3D?
Oh, this was for Destiny 2. Yeah, this is all 2D. Yeah, there was no 3D. It was just pure photo batching. I think at some point I was like, I kind of wanted to do it even more like 2D in a way, like just literally like everything would be 2D. It just to try to see if you can pull it off just photo batching. Sometimes you kind of do it vice versa. You want to do everything 3D with as little as possible paint overs in 2D.
Yeah.
But these ones, I kind of felt like I just wanted to try to see if I can, if I can make it work just all 2D. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And how much time did you get for this?
To be honest, this was when I was at Digic. I think well, I think it was the last week I started working on it before I left. I think, well, couple days, maybe 3 days, I think. Something like that, maybe 2, maybe 3. But the funny thing, I remember like now, so I'm working on this piece. It's my last day, it's end of the day. I supposed to save it, wrap it up and all that, but I'm still doing. I'm so excited, painting, fun. IT guys just come by saying, "Man, we're just unplugging your computer. Better save your stuff." I'm like, "Okay, man, give me 2 minutes." So kind of like that, 2-3 days, but yeah, I can.
Yeah. So like, how much time in general do you get to work on, let's say, a single concept and a single matte painting? Because concept is a bit different, right? Because you have to go through a lot of different iterations, or I guess maybe a concept is faster for a specific individual paint. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, what are your experience?
Yeah, I think with conceptual work, I think it all depends on what the task is about. Like, what's the main goal, right? Because like, let's say if you work in pre-production, you might just need to flesh out idea really quickly, and sometimes it's not about color or whatever. It maybe it's just about whatever, like layout type of thing. So maybe the colors and lighting might not necessarily be the best, so you might focus on that. Whereas different times, maybe different concepts, like let's say you work in post-production now, and then you need to do a concept painting or so-called style frame. So you do it as close as photoreal final frame as possible. So it's a little bit different approach too. But I think in general, in concept, usually, so you are given a task, and usually next day you show something. Sometimes you even show the same day if it's something relatively simple, but usually it's like kind of reviews and dailies on daily basis. Sometimes I remember in some pre-production work, we would have like couple days sometimes before review, but it also means that for next review, you probably would present, a few versions. So it's not just one and done painting, because you're still exploring, you're researching and doing all that type of thing. So you definitely want to kind of present, a couple or 3 versions maybe, or something like that, and hope that something will stick, or at least inspire some, further conversation. I think around that kind of timeline. But I think for matte painting, I mean, it depends really. I usually also try to work relatively fast and maybe have something to show next day or maximum the day after, something like that. But I think, if you have good connection with, with the art director or supervisor, and you definitely know what they want, and you feel confident you can pull it off, it's okay maybe to take that extra day or whatever without even showing anything, because you are on the right track. But I think if you're not sure, it's also good to maybe have a chat a little bit sooner than later, even show like as a whip, saying, well, that's what I'm thinking. This way you just get like kind of feedback maybe a little bit sooner, and you don't waste all that much time. But yeah, I think it's usually pretty fast, to be honest. I don't know. At least to me, it's kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the highlights on the road here. So what kind of tricks do you have? Like bringing out the alphas in there and then painting in the highlights, or what kind of hacks do you use?
Right. Yeah, I think usually what I do. I mean, I guess it's probably a known approach, but probably usually what I do is I would try to integrate an element in and have it, let's say, or break it down to like, let's say, sort of like 2 passes, so-called. One maybe like shadow or ambient kind of light, and the other one I would do like, I would maybe copy a layer or this same layer and put it in screen mode and adjust it with curves to sort of have the right intensity of brightness that I want there, and also tweak red, green, blue channel to get the right hue. Yeah, it's just basically that. Or sometimes I might feel lazy copying that stuff. I would just make a mask or just clipping mask of curves like on top of the same layer or whatever, crank it up, make sure I see those bright highlights, and then through the sliders in that adjustment layer, I can kind of hide or fade out the shadow areas and just just leave it in highlights. Whatever works really. It's not anything like new or something like that. I think it's more about like kind of knowing where to push it and not, rather than how, right?
Are there any kind of elements that you find hardest to match with other elements in the painting, like that you find all the time happening when you're just from painting to painting?
Right. I think it's probably easier to integrate anything into the distance rather than in the foreground, because in the foreground, you have less atmosphere, you have much more contrast, so you basically see more stuff present in front of you. So you have to be more specific, you have to be more accurate, make sure your reference fits that perspective of your plate if you're building on top of a plate. Or if you even like in this case, there was no plate. It's all built from different pieces, just like stitched together, really. But I think in the distance, because you can haze it out and just hide a lot of stuff, I think it's much easier to kind of integrate it. And I think that's why matte painting is these days still kind of used mostly towards midground and background, right? Because you can just easier and quicker implement stuff there. So
yeah,
I find it that way. I guess same for you, right?
So
like
okay. Haze, right? Just haze it out, use a lighten mode, lighten layer, and get they get the shadows right in there.
Lighting's cool.
And then sometimes if you want to get certain colors in images, I like to use the levels adjustment, but I'll find like some images just don't work, or maybe they've just been too adjusted too much and it starts to break. So then I'll just be like, I'll just replace it with a whole other image and it works a lot better. So it's like trying to fight the image all the time. Just go to another one and then you get it done in like seconds. Do you find that happens at all?
Oh yeah, definitely happens that way. That's why I usually say, if you can buy like a photo pack that has good stuff in there, it's usually a good idea to invest a little bit, a few bucks there, but you're gonna get a lot of cool stuff and you can use it later. Definitely recommend that. Sometimes you can't really combine it all in a way that would be nice, really integrated.
So what was this for?
I think it was The Last Guardian. I think so. Yeah. Let's see. I think it was The Last Guardian. Yeah. It's also for video game cinematic. It's opening shot basically. Yeah. This is all 2D as well.
Yeah.
Like photo bashed heavily.
Was this from the Arizona? What are they called? This cliff.
It's all photo bashed like crazy. It's from the same days and the same time as what we saw the Destiny one. I just wanted to kind of like, let's see if like 2D would work. I think what I used like photobash.co, right? The website. Yeah. So I think I bought a photo pack there called Red Canyon.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, obviously they don't have this sort of canyons, whatever like that, but they have cliffs, more like flat, like upright planes of cliffs and stuff. So, and I just kind of grabbed bits and pieces from there for this major section and kind of worked it and put it like that. And obviously a bunch of other references from different sources, Google, Flickr, whatever else I could find. Yeah.
I remember when I was doing one of my first matte paintings ever, and I just got I overcomplicated it like crazy. I was like, okay, I have this rock formation I have to do, and I took little bits and pieces from so many different photos, and I have to match it and all this stuff, and it took forever just doing bits and pieces, do. And I could have just grabbed probably just one photo.
Exactly, right?
And just put it in there.
Yeah, that's usually what happens, right? With time, you understand that, okay, if I can find one photo, is almost like 99% is always better. I mean, sometimes you can't, and then sometimes, you bash like all these ones at the bottom on the first page. They were all pieced together from many, many different sources. They also all 2D. Yeah, those at the very bottom. This one, for instance, this was for Access animation back in the day. I can't remember, 2014 or maybe 15. I sound so old when I say back in the day. But well, come on, it's like
But it's weird because I think like, oh, 2014, that wasn't too long
yeah,
ago. But then
I
you
feel
look
the
at
same
the
way. But
year
now
it's like 2023. What?
yeah, right. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, and I mean, you know, this stuff. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, a little bit maybe stylized and stuff like that. But you know, that's what was needed for cinematic. So yeah, that was the time when I was kind of feeling like maybe I want to work more in cinematics than in films, because you just get to do more epic shots. But somehow later I came back to movies. Yeah.
Well, I want to see this one. We don't usually go over planets so much. What was your process on this? Let me think. Is that okay? That's Jupiter in there. All right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's Jupiter.
Yeah, it's been a while as well. I mean, you know, because lately I've been doing mostly concept art, not as many matte paintings. So this is all of this stuff is kind of old, let's say. But this was, I think, a freelance gig for a friend of mine. And in my class at CGMA, I have the whole breakdown on this piece, how it was done, and like the whole shot. The shot is very long shot. Like it starts with, you know, camera moving, like looking down, and you know, maybe I think the whole length is like a minute or something like that. So it's pretty epic shot, a lot of full CG, and then towards the end we kind of come up to this matte painting, like looking at this whole thing. I think they kind of graded it probably a little bit, maybe too much. I mean,
yeah, they always it's like you look at your painting and then you see it in theaters, you're like, what?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes I guess to me, you know, because like I said before, you know, I kind of like stuff when it's a bit more grounded. I guess I also prefer more realistic, you know, color palettes and things like that. Probably the same way as you, right? When it becomes something else, you're like, well.
Yeah, no, I definitely struggle. Like, I don't often do stylized stuff, and then when the stylized comes, I'm like, towards the end, I'm like, wait, this isn't stylized enough. Now I get it. I gotta push it more. Like, you know, make it more saturated, get more bold colors, kind of thing. You know, it's like, you know, real life isn't that saturated,
right? And I think in that sense you can play with traditional painting and sometimes push those colors. And you know, if you feel like, okay, now I want to try something else, okay, why not to try like oil painting and maybe unleash myself, you know, and do a bit more. Sometimes I go
just go crazy.
Sometimes I do, yeah. And in that very moment, it feels like, oh man, it's so much fun. Saturated color is so cool. And then next day you look at it, man, it's just terrible, yeah. So
it's so much.
Yeah, you never show those paintings, but you know, you're having fun. And
it's always good to break out your norm, out of your comfort zone, right? That's the only way you can improve and see what else you can do. But like these photos, so where were you finding a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, it's all, I think,
the storms.
Yeah, it's all, I guess, NASA photographs, just kind of combining them, playing together. Yeah, I think I had like a bunch of references collected online and just kind of playing with it. I think for this type of work you could also use, you know, Terragen, at least for the base render, to get that nice kind of halo effect in the distance. But in this case, I think I just kind of painted over some reference, kind of integrating that stuff. And I think that's, at least to me, that's what I think is important, to be able to pull it off completely in 2D as well. Because I think what happens, or, you know, even from like my students, questions that I get, and from maybe younger, you know, artists, they see a painting, and if it looks great, they always want to know how it was done, what software was used and whatnot. But if it looks not that great and all available pieces of software were used, no one will care, because it just doesn't look cool. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's important to be able to know, even, you know, at 2D level, how to tweak and push and change it to make it look cool, so that if you have a good 3D base, you can just take it a little bit farther and make it not just very obvious, maybe 3D, but somewhat of a mix that just looks cool.
Yeah.
In a way.
Like a lot of times I'll do a 3D render and it won't even look like the original 3D render at all.
Right. Yeah.
Just do so much painting on top of it. It's I like it a lot, mostly for just the consistency of light,
Right.
and then help with scale as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like having I mean, like in traditional matte painting type of work or digital matte painting type of workflow, you have a plate, right? It gives you the lighting and stuff, so you have to match the same. I guess what you're saying, like with 3D, you have a base and then you kind of painting on top to make it work, or break it up to make it look more like a painting, which is, I think, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the haze, and then what you're saying is detail. Like you kind of have the area of rest over here, which is cool, and then you have so much over here, so it's kind of like a cool frame. How big was this whole thing? Because you're saying it was a big shot, right?
Yeah, well, this was the end of the the end of the shot. I think the whole thing was larger, but that other part I think was, no, sorry, I can't remember how big was that. But this one, I believe it might have been 8K or it might have been 4K. I'm not even sure. It's definitely not less than 4K, because I never paint well, I mean, if I know it's gonna go on a large screen, I would never paint less than 4K. But I think it's probably, maybe I can find somewhere. I'm not sure.
But the haze that you have under here, the blending is nice. Like you have the whole Fresnel effect on it, so you have less down in here, but then it gets more kind of denser, like kind of like when you're looking at a river,
right,
where you have the reflections further away, but then when it's like closer to you and looking down, you don't see them.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, that's what I was saying at the beginning, like what kind of students struggle quite a bit with, like this kind of values and how values recede back into the distance. Quite often they afraid to push stuff back, and I guess I was the same way. And with time you kind of learn that, like I said earlier, less is more sometimes, and then don't be afraid to push the stuff back so that it will allow you really feel that depth. Even if it's exaggerated slightly bit, it would still work, rather than if you don't do that, it's just gonna look more flat. So
yeah, that's nice. Let's see what else other map paintings you got here. I need to expand the number of images you can show on one screen on one portfolio page.
Right.
All right, so which one do you want to talk about in here? Oh, that's cool. Let's do this. First 3D. Obviously, this is 3D based. Whoopsie.
This was also old days.
Oh, it's old. Let's get to the new stuff.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like the matte paintings, it all will be like 5-6 years old or 8, whatever. So I mean, newer ones would be in conceptual art section.
Okay.
But
so this is cool. Like you got a base on this. Like, did you model this? Was it handed off to you?
Yeah, I modeled this stuff, and then I think I put like basic texture on top of it, and just went on top and kind of painted over it.
Nice. Did you model in the pipes, or was that photo?
It's been a while. I think these pipes, they might have been from a photo, actually, because I think looking at the ones on the left, I think it's just duplicated photo squashed. But I think the whole base, obviously 3D, and I think these pipes, maybe they are from 2D, and the textures on top are a little bit above.
Do you ever do the painting underneath the lighting technique, or do you just mostly do like soft light and overlays and whatever?
What do you mean painting underneath
or just
the lighting?
Or opaque? So basically you get like you have this render, and then you have the lighting split off into another folder, and then you have the texture diffuse albedo underneath that. So in Photoshop you do, I believe it's a multiply overlay. You can do a little slight adjustment, but then in between you can add photos and
gotcha. Yeah, like
with the shadow.
Yeah, when you work with diffuse pass, and then you overlay or screen the lighting pass on top. I see what you mean.
So then the shadows go easily on top of the photo.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I probably, like back then on these ones, I think I did it a little bit different. I think I kind of found the technique of extracting the shadow shapes, and then I would just kind of darken it with curves and stuff like that in a way that it would just look exactly the same. But yeah, definitely know what you're saying. Yeah, I've done that too. But I mean, these days, I don't know, I just go with whatever whatever comes.
Yeah, so I find that myself, like,
I don't care.
lately I haven't been really doing that at all. Usually when I would have to do that, it was just like, okay, they just don't have, like, they're not sure what the lighting is going to end up being. So you got to have that flexibility. And then, or they just don't have any kind of detail at all. And I'll just like throw some stuff up there, especially for like cliffs or something. It really works well because you can just throw things underneath and you have like a base, like loose base cliff. So you just have some kind of shadow in there. But lately I'm just like, I like pushing the 3D so far that I just don't really need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go to your concepts since, let's see, those are more recent. Let's go back to...
Yeah, I guess whatever works really. You can do it this way or that way. It doesn't really matter. I mean, as far as techniques go, I think lately I just don't really care all that much.
So you have concepts that are more painterly, and then concepts that are more photo. Like this one, you could easily see this in a movie. Like, not even so much a concept, you can see it as like a matte painting in a way.
This was sorry. This was, I did it back when I was at Pixel. This was a kind of style frame for, like big full CG shot that they were actually super happy to have it. And this one is actually good example of what we were talking at the beginning when, let's say if you work at a company as a matte painter, but if your art director, sees that you do conceptual work too, they might just give you this type of task to do like these style frames for CG, for comp, for build, whatever departments are called there at that studio. So yeah, this was basically I think it might be fun if I show you the
should I let you share screen?
Yeah, just for a brief moment. Yeah, just real quick. So this was what I was given. This was super early in like post-production of this shot. This is what they had. This is what they gave me. Literally this, it's not even a 3D scene. I mean, what they gave me, they just gave me this screen grab from Maya.
Yeah.
And they said...
It's like, yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just, it's the viewport.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it gives you idea what is kind of there, but it's obviously very rough and Lambert shader and whatnot. And what they tell you, well, okay, it's taking place in like, Shanghai or whatever the name of that city. I can't remember now. I think it was Shanghai in China. And so you need to do a style frame or look frame that they can use as a guide, basically. So I did this, and they use it throughout the whole creation of the shot, and the shot ended up looking like this, which is not obviously the same, and it shouldn't be the same, but it's fairly close to the concept basically. And this was full CG shot. So yeah, stuff like this, those concepts, I really like doing.
So that was heavy. That's a heavy, different camera angle. They just basically gave you the aerial view and kind of scale, and then you just painted the whole thing.
Exactly.
Like, there were no renders at all.
No render.
Wow. So that was just pure.
Yeah, that was what you saw, that gray scale cube trees, whatever were there. Yeah, that was what they have at the time. And like I said, they needed to have a guideline for lighting of the whole city, for the the buildings, how they would look at at night, how the whole thing would feel at night and stuff like that. Because they had people who could do who could model, who could texture, who could light it, but they need to rely on something. And I find it still very much happening these days too. This is basically VizDev, well, not VizDev, VFX direction for the team basically. Yeah, which is a lot of fun to me. I like doing that.
Yeah, no, because the thing is that now, well, you were saying that previous one was actually full CG. There's no matte painting at all in that, you think? Or just a far distance?
Oh, in that shot, it was pretty much full CG. I think I ended up helping a bit with the sky. Oh no, I think I think I did initial pass, and I think someone else at the studio finalized it and did the matte painting for the distant island, something like that. I mean,
Yep.
it's, like I said, this one is 2014, I think. That's when I was at Pixar, so it's been a long time, almost 9 years now. I mean, I might forget some little process things how it was, but something like that.
This is cool. So you clearly have 3D in your concepts as well now. Was this a recent one?
This one, I think it was 2018, maybe like 5 years ago.
Okay, we're getting closer.
Yeah, I'm not very active online. Unfortunately, who knows? It just takes some time. And
Yeah.
I posted this one recently. There is like free tutorial on this one available in 2 languages, in English and Russian.
Okay.
So you can
That's
download
cool.
it for free. I mean, anybody who is interested. So it's on my website. It's on ArtStation, I think, as well. Yeah, I mean here, just the 3D render. I used here, I think, V-Ray and Maya, and then, well, I mean, I modeled the whole thing, texture it. I mean, it's nothing too super crazy here. Texture it, render it, light it, render it, and then did some paint overs. But the fun for these ones was not to use any like kit bash and stuff like that. I actually try to do it for my personal work, not to, sometimes, most of the time, I'd say, not to use any kit bash, just do everything myself, just for fun, to practice different things. Maybe sometimes I sculpt characters or do vehicles and whatnot, just to kind of once again step out from the comfort zone of doing just environments. I just find it fun to do all spectrum of things. This was the case here.
That'd be cool if you could just in the description you can add the link to your tutorial.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I can do that too.
Cool. So which one do you want to check out?
The ones with temples, these ones are more recent ones. Well, couple 3 years ago, I think I did. Then that's very recent stuff I haven't published. I mean, like I said, I just need to kind of go and do the update. This was fun too. Like like modeling, or I think sculpting this whole temple thing. Though was.
Did you sculpt the tire tracks here?
No, this is all mix of 2D and 3D. I think for the environment itself, it's mostly photo bashing, with some bits and pieces. I think maybe rocks, if I'm not mistaken. I think the main 3D part was, the temple basically. Yeah, and I kind of wanted.
And you did this without this is all by hand though, no kit bashing?
No. That was the whole thing to sculpt it from scratch. Yeah, that was the whole thing.
Did you do this in ZBrush or with any tricks? Because that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I used 3D code for it. I kind of at some point I kind of gave up on ZBrush. I'm not sure why. I think because I'm very lazy, to be honest. I'm usually trying to simplify my pipeline as much as I can, and I find 3D code to be closer to, let's say, Photoshop in the way you use it. It just kind of sticks more to my 2D workflow in Photoshop, and I kind of just found it a little bit more easier to use for me, and I kind of just switched to that completely and ended up using that more.
I've always just stuck with ZBrush. I don't know 3D code, so maybe that's something else I'll have to experiment with.
I think it doesn't matter. Like I said, I don't like these days. I think I kind of passed the thing when people were so concerned, like what 3D render you use, what 3D package and whatnot. Like I said, it doesn't matter as long as the final output looks cool. Who cares? I mean, well, it does matter if we talk about visual effects pipeline or a studio pipeline where you have to use certain tools. That makes sense. Like let's say if you are a modeler or doing sculpting, in Visual Effects Studio or something, maybe 3D code is not the best choice to learn. But if your main goal is to output a 2D painting, I don't really care what tools you use, and your supervisor wouldn't, because they want to see the problem solved, the storytelling. They want to see cool design, storytelling, beautiful lighting, and basically answer on their question. So whatever tools you find useful, just go for it.
Well, then that kind of segues over to AI.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel when someone uses AI, or maybe a certain percentage amount of it, or are you seeing people start to use AI?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, well, he lives in a different country, and let's say he's very experienced artist and very good artist, and I think he's very good at like drawing, maybe not from academic standpoint, but still very solid drawing. Like he could draw everything in with every angle and all that stuff. So very good, and a lot of sketches and stuff like that, and that's all pretty cool. But to me personally, I find maybe sometimes he's not as excited about color and lighting. So for him, using things like stable diffusion, where he could load his sketch and run it through the system a couple times, the stable diffusion would give him interpretation of his sketch with sort of, let's say, final render, and he's super happy with it. Like he's saying, man, this is it, I don't need anything else, I don't need 3D, nothing. I would just do like sketches, scribbles and whatnot, and it just does it. And I mean, I saw what he did with it. I think it's pretty cool. Maybe not necessarily my thing, let's say, because besides everything else that is great there, I also like Sauron approach, when, or let's say, I like when there is a realistic color, when there are certain decisions about how you design things and how you can later interpret it in the final painting, how you subordinate something, how you play it up, how you do all those things that sometimes you might not even do in the sketch, but you kind of do it in the final painting. I like that. I want to see that from a person, because every time when I see his versions rendered through stable diffusion, I can immediately tell, and I like his sketches more. I see how he thinks in his sketches. I see the life in his sketches, decisions and stuff like that. And it's not just about him, it's about everybody. Sometimes it's just it just doesn't have that, I don't know, human input. And let's say we are also,
Well, what about painting on top of it? What if he started doing that? Like he got the image and then he could just sketch on top.
Yeah, well, that's what I recommended him to do, because lately all his stuff started to look like he's been using the same model to render his sketches. So the renders kind of have tendency to look kind of similar, whereas his sketches look different because it's very much of his own style in sketches, but the renders from stable diffusions, I think it could work. But I think studios a little bit, I think, not necessarily maybe afraid of it, but I know like Sony, for instance, they did not allow their artists in art department to use AI software, let's say. And I think, well, at ILM we had Dolly for some time. I mean, we probably still have maybe a license, I'm not sure, I haven't been playing with it lately. I think we played all with it for a little bit. There were some fun outputs. I played with Disco Diffusion and Midjourney. But again, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm not getting exactly what I want from it. I just find like what I really want, I need to do it myself. But again, there is nothing wrong with it. And I saw, like I said, people doing great stuff. But also those people saying, well, I spend hours or days or weeks coming up with these images. Well, I mean, I could probably do it by hand at the same time, if not faster. So, but let's acknowledge that this is the state of the day. Maybe tomorrow AI can do exactly what I need, and then, well, that's it. The game is over. Like I said, I just find that what I personally like, AI just not doing that. So let's just put it this way. And I'm not against it. I'm totally cool with it. I think there should be like regulations about how it's being used regarding the copyrights and stuff like that. But that's a different subject. Let's just not.
Yeah, that's the ethics part.
Yeah, we can go into
Yeah.
a rabbit hole for too long with that. Yeah.
Well, do you when I sometimes see, like, because I have this on black and white right now, and I want to bring this up. Like, 'cause sometimes I see dark values in, say, the midground or somewhere in traditional paintings, like classic ones, and some other pros that do it for like the concept, and it doesn't follow the atmospheric perspective value rules. It's like, why is that darker than the, say, the foreground blacks? Do you come across that a lot? And if you do, like, do you have like a different reasoning or perspective on that? Is it maybe just to force the eye to go there? It's not necessarily a matte painting, it's a concept or art direction.
Yeah, I think it's usually because of that. It's just usually to emphasize what is needed. And I mean, I totally see what you're saying. It happens quite a bit in traditional art. Not always, but I've seen quite a bit of it. I think, like, how you can justify it or how you can make it work for you. I mean, you have to be careful with it, obviously, but maybe the way you can use this approach, or not technique, but this kind of treatment, let's say, is like, let's say you can have, like, in the foreground you can have that cast shadow, and then in the midground where your focal point is, you can have the light hitting your focal point. So then obviously you will also have, a shadow of that object. So you will have a light and the shadow, and this way you have the foreground in shadow, and you also letting the eye travel into towards the midground to the focal point, where you have a little bit more, contrast as well. And that might be also just be the visual, like the way the way you see it, like the value of that shadow might not necessarily be actually as dark. It's just the way you feel it because of the light next to it. It's kind of relativity, right? Like if you put red next to a kind of grayish color, so that grayish might kind of look a little bit greener, but if you put it in different relationships, so it might be seen slightly differently, or you can perceive it differently rather. So something like that. I guess it may be just illusion, or it might be a trick. And sometimes the way I kind of show it, they just do it like they cast the shadow in the foreground and letting the eye kind of go there.
Yeah, obviously your values are all great in here. Yeah, that's cool. Was this which one is more for a studio concept here?
Let's see. Wait, you can go up. Let's actually see what on the second page. I just wanted to even know what was that. What is there actually? Yeah, well, there are a few. Yeah, like this is more painterly that you're looking at. The ones with spaceships that were for a pitch, I think we did for Netflix. Any of them?
Did you get the model?
I modeled this whole thing. Well, this was heavily inspired by John Harris, and then so I basically kind of did my version of it, and then we elaborated further. It was like we had a brief, so we needed to do like a bunch of pitch kind of paintings, so that we would kind of present. Well, our art director would present to the client and hopefully get it all greenlit. I don't think it ever went too far, but it was a lot of fun to do that. I loved that, this idea was like big epic shapes, big scale, massive. Yeah. And this is old, by the way, too. It's like 2018 once again, like 5 years ago.
So like, how dense was this model that you built? Like, was it literally everything?
Yeah, it's pretty much everything.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like the paint over, some of the little break-ups here and there, and the wires and the lights, the little tiny lights. But I think most of the paint over was just like overlaying like textures, like the leaks and things like that to kind of break it up. Lights, and the little kind of, I think maybe the little spaceship in the middle with with the exhaust like trails coming out, stuff like that, the lights, flares, things like that. So yeah, I think I used a bit of displacement maybe in a couple spots to get a bit of extra details. But yeah, I mean, I think the trick is to find the way to have the model as simple as possible, but still make it look like it's complex. That's why I really like, Yannick's work, Yannick Dussault. Like, I think he's doing it very well. Like, if you look at his conceptual work, it's most of the time it's fairly simple, but he's utilizing textures so wisely that you feel like, oh man, there is some complexity going on. But it's very, very well thought out and placed, and so tricky to get there.
So this one is more, so how come sometimes you go more kind of photoreal versus like heavily stylized 3D / photos, and then you just go straight up painterly like this? What's the deal? Like, was this just you had less time, or was this a personal exercise?
No, this was,
or they just wanted.
Yeah, this was also for a pitch that we did. I think for this one, so our art director approached the whole team, and then so they needed explore idea of some ancient city. I mean, there were like obviously more details given to us, and we were like, I don't even know, 5 or maybe 6 or 7 people. So basically like shotgun ideas, based on that brief. Quite typical pre-production work. You get a little bit of info. The script might not even develop at that point, so they just want to see what you can come up with, and maybe, like I said, something might stick. So I think I was wrapping up on Godzilla when they started, which one of the concepts here, by the way, we can have a look maybe later. But so I was wrapping up, and by the time I joined, I think maybe a couple days later or something, I saw that everyone was doing more of a kind of realistic version. Some people more detailed, some people heavily 3D and stuff like that. And I just felt like, well, I just need to do something different, because we already have good variety of things. Someone did photo-bashed versions of some cool stuff, on islands, some kind of ancient temples and whatnot. Some other artists did a very like heavy 3D version, which was great as well. And I just thought, well, let's just do a sketch and really play up the color. So maybe in that sense, it might, spark something there if I just go kind of loose and stuff like. And sometimes loose is actually better, because you don't answer everything, so they can respond to overall feel of it, rather than if you go a little bit tighter, they just by nature it feels like you're suggesting the final look, and they might just not be ready for that. Sometimes they like it and they say, yeah, that's it. But sometimes they really want to have more hands on it, maybe, and or more room for interpretation and stuff like that. So a little bit more of this impressionistic, so to speak, approach actually works better sometimes.
Well, that's some good advice right there too, because I feel like part of the skill sets of being a professional is it's like an art form of working with the client.
Oh yeah. Totally, absolutely. It's a big skill. Yeah.
And it's not even just the clients, even just like people like your VFX soup or art director and stuff, trying to figure out what do they want. He's like, you have to read their mind, right?
I think it's the
hardest. And then
yeah.
it's a whole it's definitely it takes skill and practice for sure. And I think it's a good idea to go loose, get an overall, take it through stages, right? Do you ever start with black and white first?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it might be like a sequence of even line drawings. Like on Snowpiercer, I did like a bunch of art for Snowpiercer in pre-production for TV series. I never shared it. I might share it later. But yeah, I did like a lot of like thumbnail kind of sketches. So then with the art director and supervisor, we had a look. We picked the ones that we felt had, good angles and good potential to kind of being developed a little bit more towards like keyframe with environments in them as a kind of main subject. So then I did black and whites. I did color versions of them, just literally painting, not even 3D at that point, just literally Similar to this one. This one had nothing like 3D or whatever. Just like start like scribbling and then just go further, like refining it. Similar there. So, and then I did that. So based on that, we had a look at the ones that I did. We picked the ones that had most potential, and then I did more of a, let's say, like for the real version of it. So like, yeah, sometimes it's just very gradual process, and that's why I was saying earlier, it always depends what you do and what stage and what for. Like quite often I get a question like, well, can I use Git bash elements in my paintings if it's a concept? I usually say, well, it all depends what's the main task. If your task is like design a building and you're going straight up on TurboSquid, download the model and present it to your art director saying that's what you did, well, obviously it's not the way. Maybe you can grab bits and pieces from there, come up with your overall big shape, design of that shape, and grab bits and pieces from that other model that you downloaded to kind of dress it up a little bit. That might work. However, like it might work that you take that model and use it as is if your main goal is the whole environment to show big vista maybe. So in that case, no one will care as much at early stage if whatever building you use there. So you might use stock models there because your main subject, once again, or goal is to show the whole feel and light and how it all looks like it as a whole rather than individual assets. Yeah, hope that makes sense.
I see a lot of black sketches, like lines everywhere. Is this from like the under drawing sketch, or is it just you just putting in some like details, or were they happy accidents? Like what was that?
Yeah, I think it's a filter, like a posterized filter in Photoshop. I think I grabbed it from Christian Altsman. He worked at ILM before he went to Lucasfilm, so he now he works mostly for Dak Cheng for Star Wars TV series. So I think the way he utilizes this filter is it just basically helps to blend it all together. Sometimes when you throw stuff in, photo bash, paint over and whatnot, sometimes this filter is kind of helping it to kind of combine it all together. Yeah.
So so you basically painted the whole thing, and then after the merge, all this one image or one layer, and you do a posterized.
Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah, I mean, in some cases you can do it in between or like in the middle or towards the end and then paint on top. I mean, there is no right or wrong thing, but idea is like this. Yeah,
of course.
Applying at the very end, like with your matte paintings, right? Sometimes you might apply noise or grain, chromatic aberration, indent and whatnot, just to kind of tie it all together as a final step. A bit of blur maybe, and or bloom in the highlights. Same approach.
Yeah. Well, that's the question though. So, matte painters, they send it off to the comp, and then they'll add their chromatic aberration and blooms and stuff like that. Are you baking it in, or are you having it on just like another layer to just be like, here's kind of like how I see it, or like what are you doing?
For personal work, I would probably bake it in because it just helps to kind of blend it slide a bit more.
Yeah.
For professional work, it doesn't really matter. Like good art director can see through all the rendering, all the tricks, whatever you can do. They really see to the point. So whether or not you want to apply it, it's up to you. If you want, great. If not, it really doesn't matter, because whether it's a concept, I mean, even if it's a concept, they will still look at the essence of it, and whether you have that grain there or chromatic aberration, they don't really care. It's just up to you if just for yourself you want to do it. So yeah, and obviously for matte paintings the same way. If you want to have it as a maybe a little bit more kind of finished looking thing in your portfolio, you can apply it so that it implies idea that it's very final. But obviously if you pass it on layers to comp, then you don't do that stuff.
Do you do a lot of slap comps when you're doing the professional matte paintings?
Well, I mean, I know Nuke fairly well. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly do projections and slap comps. Yeah, well, sometimes I do. Yeah. Like if I, like recently on the show, I was kind of doing the whole set of things, like art directing some stuff, matte paintings, conceptual work quite a bit as well. Yeah, like the whole range basically, and then I would even set up projections. Yeah. I mean, depends on the show really. Like, sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, do you have any other images, or should we jump over to maybe check out the community artwork if you want to get some feedback on their stuff, or do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, we can talk about any of this if you feel it makes sense. But I mean, idea is similar. Like there is one from Assassin's Creed, some from Black Panther, there is from Godzilla on different pages. There is stuff here.
You know what? I think I have the map painting. It might have been Whiskey Tree or the final shot of this film somewhere on the sites.
Right.
Yeah, this is cool. This was a cool shot, and so I didn't know. That's cool that you did the concept for it. Was this a hybrid of 3D and photos, or?
Oh, this one, yeah, this is pretty old as well. I think this one was very much similar to, remember the night one we saw, where I showed you the screen grab of Maya viewport?
Okay.
It was very much the same thing. Like they just had very rough block out in Maya, so I just went for it. Yeah,
cool.
I don't think I used any 3D here. I think it was just pure 2D. Yeah. It's funny. Like when I look at this stuff, it always brings back memory. Like I was doing this stuff fairly quickly. Actually, it's like a day for this stuff, and maybe second day to polish it a little bit, just like final touch. And these days you're like, oh well, okay. If you do stuff like this, you obviously, I'm jumping into 3D for sure, setting up the whole thing and all that. But for some reason back then I was like, man, I'm just gonna do it in 2D, and it would be super fast, and it worked all the time. Like they always had and everything. But these days, I don't know, it's just the whole tendency kind of changed. Like now, I would probably do it starting in 3D. Yeah, but
Yeah, I think it's that whole flexibility of changing the light, and it's like, I feel like photos give it that realism, right? But the 3D gives you that flexibility.
Yeah.
And you can always push it to photorealism later, but
yeah, for sure.
It's just
definitely flexibility and being able to change the angle and stuff like that is huge, especially if you're developing stuff early on. It's quite important.
Yeah, definitely changing the angle is huge.
Lighting and
so this piece was a photo or painted from scratch?
Yeah, it's just a mix.
Cool.
I mean, here it's obviously photo bashing with painting on top.
Yeah.
I mean, like some of the brush strokes it's still visible, I think, here. But mostly I guess photo bashed together. There is this guy, if you know, Andrea Wallen. He is a concept artist, and he's like, even up to this day, it's surprising. He's using Photoshop CS3, and that's it. He doesn't use any 3D. Nothing, just that. So it's funny to see that even this day.
We got disconnected and we're back in. Let me share my screen. Let's just jump into the community section if you're cool with that. So let's check out the community section. This is where the non-senior work and senior whips are located. It's all filtered and everything through the different skill level and artists, junior work and everything, and senior whips on this area to separate from the homepage. But is there any work you want to check out and give some feedback on?
The one above the sunset, I think, if you scroll up. Yeah. Well, cool then. Yeah, I mean, this is I think this is a good start, but I would say, in general, it's probably, advice for most of the beginner students. Just try to look at real life references and try to see how things, recede, how the light kind of falls off the surfaces and stuff like that, and how things kind of change value-wise as they recede back into the distance. Because for instance, in this piece specifically, even though this artist is trying to introduce a little bit of depth, if we look at these buildings or whatever, like factory pieces receding towards the left, you can kind of see that he's reducing that contrast and stuff like that. But it's not always just kind of lift up the value. It's also reducing the contrast and taking up the color of the atmosphere and stuff like that. So it's sometimes it's not as simple as it seems to be. The sky also seems to be a little bit like, either stretched or like copy pasted or like, patched as well, so that the sky itself does not necessarily have enough depth as well. So it kind of feels overall flat. So the other thing, if you look at the image as a whole, like the values in the middle also look very much, it's just very close and a little bit confusing as well. It's just packed too much. Like the sky seems to be quite busy. The middle section seems to be quite busy. Maybe the focal point is meant to be that brighter spot on the right, but it's a little bit, unfortunately, it's a little bit too much to the right, and it doesn't necessarily help the story. So let's say if we have a dude in the foreground, and let's say we simplify the whole idea to thirds from composition standpoint, the dude on the foreground would be on the lower right intersection, right? So it would make sense to place the focal point on the opposite upper side, diagonal symmetry, somewhere in that section. So you would let the eye kind of travel a little bit more through the image, and all this stuff in the foreground, like the vehicle and whatever else, you should, or he should, or she should place it in a way that would help lead towards that focal point. So right now it's almost front to the camera, and unfortunately it's not the best placement. So it would, whatever things you do as an artist, it's usually great to try to help the viewer to understand what you want to say, and help, especially for outdoor scenes, help the eye to travel into the distance. So in this case, once again, making sure the focal point would read well, placed in a strategical spot, and also letting the eye travel into the distance without making it too evident that it's competing with the focal point, but still letting the eye do that, so that you're not afraid of that negative space as well, so that there is area for the eye to rest. Overall, I would just say simplify it. Make statements where you want to go as far as the viewer should look at. Simplify it. Less is more, clearly in this case specifically. More depth in the sky, guide the eye. Also, lighting is such a key thing. And then, so, I usually looking at work, I usually try to see that the artist is utilizing lighting for his advantage and for story moments as well. So usually try to highlight those spots with the light that makes sense. That's what I was saying earlier, like when you put the shadow in the foreground and then you design the light in a way that it's emphasizing what is important in the frame or what the story is about. Whereas if you emphasize something that is not important there, it's all becomes, a little bit just confusing. So
even if he just got rid of this foreground vehicle and this had like shadows just casting here and then a pocket of light right there, like what you were saying, it would just help get the eye to there and even create layers of depth as well. And some interest. Having form always helps, right? If you have a light direction, like this is just an overcast, but then you have a big bright light there, but like I don't see any kind of formed shadows, you know what I mean? It seems flat, probably because of the haze. But like what you were talking about before with the haze over here, how it's just kind of just lifting the blacks, like you're saying, take maybe this section over here and paint opaquely some heavier haze to push it back. Is that what you're talking about, to kind of hide more of the detail?
It could be that. It's also, it's not necessarily getting just lighter, right? Sometimes you're also making it darker, but losing the detail. So it just becomes, as it is receding back in the distance, it's just losing details and having less, contrast. So it becomes more of a flat shape, but it's very gradual. Yeah, it's basically just, losing the details, and it becomes more of a flat shape. Like sometimes when you look at those distant mountains, right? Very distant ones, most of the times they're kind of still darker than the sky behind. So this is also important to keep in mind, that those kind of, firm element, they're darker than the sky behind. Sometimes they might be lighter, but it's very tricky, and with experience, with experienced painters, it's usually working well. But with the ones who kind of starting off, they tend to kind of make it a little bit too light. Is that still going? I've got a message offline that we are offline or something.
Oh no, it's showing. It's still recording.
Okay.
That's weird. So yeah, no, so you're saying like the mountain is darker than the sky, which will make sense because it's not the sky. The sky is often the brightest value.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so you're basically what you're saying is that like there could be, let's say, a shadow that is casting across this area.
They can be just a shadow, and it just becomes more of a silhouette. It's just silhouette. It's just like still the level of details there is basically still the same. But if you were to kind of reduce the contrast, not just lifting the blacks, but reduce the contrast, overall it wouldn't necessarily be only lighter. It would also sometimes get darker as well, but with less details in it. So, and if you control it well and you gradually push it back, yes, it's gonna be lighter for sure as it goes back into the distance. But it's not only lifting the blacks of that level, it's reducing the contrast and then lifting the the dark value as well, and implementing the bluer color to help it kind of go back. And behind the focal point, by the way, he could not here, but where his current focal point is here, he could also push that stuff back. That would kind of help, because it looks like the stuff there has more contrast than the stuff right on the left of that above. A little bit above.
Oh, this stuff.
Yeah, this stuff on the right has more contrast than the section on the left with the crane or whatever there is. Yeah, this section. See, it's a little bit more lifted, and it looks like it doesn't even respect the same lighting as those structures on the right. And visually somehow it's not reading the way he wanted to show it. It looks like the stuff on the right looks like it's fairly close, but the stuff on the left supposed to be a little bit farther back. But with such scale and distance, it kind of doesn't read quite as well. Anyway, I would suggest to be a little bit more brave with the atmosphere, even if he wouldn't change anything but worked a little bit more with the atmosphere. It would be much more kind of readable image. But as a whole, I would probably consider everything that we just said.
It becomes, when you start enjoying painting with atmosphere, it's more fun, because you're like, oh, I can really manipulate the values and the depth and bring things forward and play with scale just with that simple, just thinking about value and or atmosphere.
Yeah.
So is there any tricks you have to say, because let's say he likes this with just one directional light and he's not putting any kind of cards to cast shadows or anything. How would you make it look like it's actually casting a shadow? Because it would be more like a day for night kind of thing, like, are there any tricks you advise for, instead of, they say, like, you have this bright spot here and then you're like, wait, that has to be in shadow? Would you just paint it out by hand, use levels? Like, what do we
you mean
or just re-render it? Well,
I mean, ideally, yes. If it was, if it is a 3D base, for sure, it's better to re-render it. If you're working at a studio doing like visual effects, art direction or whatever art direction, you would probably just paint on top. You could go with opaque brush even, and kind of scribble in the values and colors that you want. And I would, to introduce light, I would probably either use curves, select a mask where I want it to be, or maybe select an area that I want, copy paste it and put that in screen mode, crunch it with curves, adjust the temperature and stuff like that. And really, like, I think, using the lighting to guide the eye, tell that story, and just use it as a design in your image, or, design as far as like break up the shapes, guide the eye, and, have the groupings of light and groupings of shadow. That would really kind of do, because
can you explain that a little bit more? Groupings of this, that's an interesting way to put it. Groupings of light and groupings of shadow.
Yeah, it's like, value kind of grouping. Like, basically, it's kind of what I was saying before or earlier, right? If you have like solid value structure that is usually fairly simple, then you can put quite a bit of detail and still have a simple read on the image. So if you have kind of like a connection between this to that through like value patterns, like you kind of merging it like basically from many different assets through values, you kind of connecting them into a shape, so that you make it like a grouping of, let's say, in shadow, and then you're making a grouping in light. So and then when you squint at it, right, so it kind of becomes an interesting distribution of light and shadow as a whole thing. So it kind of more from an abstract standpoint, but it helps to get rid of that clutter and stuff that kind of gets too much like detailed and stuff like that. And if you're careful, like I said, you can put as many details as you want if you're careful and not overstating too much, because the danger is also like you made those groupings of values and stuff and then you start overloading it with details, then those planes or groupings, they can just break because it's just too much of noise. So that noise doesn't belong to that value plane or the grouping of that value, or
That's good. Let's check out another one. Why am I not? Let's check out this. Let's see this one. This is a new one that was recently put up here apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the thinking behind it is kind of right. I mean, it's a little bit overly kind of processed or fried up a little bit. I mean, and even like this, I mean, I would even well, first of all, to be honest, like I said from the beginning, find a reference, because unfortunately or fortunately, if you're starting out and you want to do realistic work, it's very important to look at the real life, and it's always been and it always will be. And because you start inventing stuff and then you get too carried away with these curves, whatever you're doing, you're just getting lost in there, and then you end up looking at it and it might just not have the right balance. Because see, like here, the colors overall kind of palette, he kind of tries to, or she, I'm sorry, maybe he or she, I'm not sure.
Or it.
Well, we can say they.
There are a lot of things we can say nowadays.
I mean, well, I mean, you're right. Well, sometimes we say they, and that kind of works. So
yeah, it's everything, but who knows? I'm too old for this.
Yeah, right. We wish sometimes things would be more simple than they are, right? With all this crazy stuff that is going on there. I mean, just looking at real life would certainly give you the best example of what needs to be done. Like, find the reference that is representing as close as possible what you want to do, and try to not necessarily copy it, but try to use those values and colors in your image. Have it on top of every layers and switch it on and off sometimes. So make a mask with make few rectangular selections, fill it with black in your mask so it will let you see through what you have, and try to balance it, try to match. You will see how much better your image will be, because once again, I don't want to go too hard, but it looks like there is a lot of kind of decisions that are not necessarily based on whatever kind of firm or solid idea behind it. Like, the water is getting kind of greenish, there is that highlight there in the distance, which should kind of represent the sun going down, but it's not.
Yeah,
there is no sun. The sky colors
a
little bit off, the mountains, the colors in the mountains a little bit off. That very distant mountain has a little bit of a weird value. That's what I was saying. Like, be very careful with those distant, the one on the right, not very distant on the left, but the one on the right. Like, if you squint, the value of the mountain almost, maybe it's because of that cloud right above it, the value of the mountain, no, sorry, in the middle.
Oh,
yeah,
this one?
you see like the cloud behind us. Oh, the cloud right above.
I think that's actually the mountain, the whole mountain that's lifted up there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
Because of that cloud that is darker there, it's just making it look a little bit like a ghost type of layer, which is you know, the colors in the foreground as well. And I'm sorry, it's just a little bit of everything. I don't want to just be too
Well, I think he's a student, right?
Yeah.
So I think the greatest thing that he could do is actually just use my site and convert and just use the black and white button and just compare his work to the pros and just see, like, what does he do? Like, that's what I'm hoping the site will get them to learn from the pros. That's why I want it to be like this reference kind of gallery and separate, you know, from the main page from this page so they can see for sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's a great start. It's just a matter of kind of looking a little bit more at the real photographs and try to kind of understand and learn. There is certainly good potential. Like, the values kind of receding. There is logic to it, but there is also room for improvement, do you think?
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you from your family.
Yeah, I guess they're kind of waiting for me. I think I'm just gonna roll.
Yeah, I heard the scream in the background. So
waiting to eat, I think.
Yes, food time.
Yeah, it's been a while, yeah.
But yeah, this has been great, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's great getting to know you, your story, your history. Yeah.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah.
Thank you for participating. I can't wait to see what else you have to share on the site, and maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, feel free to share whatever great stuff you have. It's always cool to check it out, and we'll do the same on my end as soon as I can. Yeah, and like I said, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and yeah, we'll look forward to seeing what you come up with next. And all the best with the website. Looking pretty cool. I've checked it out a couple times. You have a lot of cool stuff there. You should get some OG there, like Matthew or Yannick and stuff. I mean. Interview them.
I know. I need to get their contacts. I have their work. I have Dussault's work on there, but it's like, because that's the point of the site is that. So now you, as a senior, says we trust you're now officially an Atmo approved senior.
Awesome.
Congratulations!
Super happy. Yeah.
So you got the blue check mark. You now can upload any images, so you don't necessarily have to just upload your work.
Yeah.
You can upload other people's stuff, and then like what you did, you just claim whenever someone actually makes a profile, they just claim the work, and they can choose to keep it up or delete it. Because I wanted to build like the ultimate reference library. So if you see any cool like awesome photo on the internet, put it up there. Any traditional painting, put it up there. Any cool shots from film, there's a section for film, right?
Sure.
So
yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Awesome. Well,
all right, appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
We'll keep in touch.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to you later. See ya.